We have a couple of excused absences to address this afternoon. Mark Sr. and Jonathan Page have both requested an excused absence. Do we have a motion to excuse them?
Move to excuse.
Okay, David. And a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Those absences are excused.
Mr. Chair, if I could just clarify
Yes,
who was
please.
the second?
I believe it was Ken Carper.
That was me. Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you.
But note Mr. Stansel's willingness to provide the second as well. Everyone should have had a chance to review the minutes from our March meeting. Are there any items anyone needs to address in those minutes? No. So is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve. Ken.
And a second?
Second.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Carper, second by Reverend Taylor. And all in favor? Okay, looks like that's unanimous. And I should have just taken stock here. We do have a quorum here, right? More than 6 members present. Great. Well, moving right along, we want to move on to the stormwater staff updates. Wayne?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I would like to note we have a couple of promotions that I'd like to announce within the Stormwater Division. As those of you who were here in January saw, I described a reorganization of the infrastructure group in the division that created 2 new supervisory positions. And we have filled both of those positions, both with in-house staff. So we're pleased to announce that David Kiker, who's senior engineer, project manager in our infrastructure group, will lead that infrastructure project management team as a supervisor. And then secondly, there's a new drainage assistant supervisor position, and Chaz Webb, who has been a senior plan reviewer in our plan review group, is moving over to lead that new drainage assistance group. Both of them will report to Dale Hyatt, who you recall was promoted to stormwater administrator, overseeing a aggregated infrastructure project delivery group. So we're real pleased to have those give these opportunities to David and Chaz, and look forward to working with them in their new positions. And there are some other changes in progress. So I'll have some more updates for you next month on some other staff changes. There is in your packet, in the past, the commission has asked for a quarterly update on Raleigh Rainwater rewards. So in your packet, there is an update on projects, and that list includes those projects that do not meet the threshold for commission review and approval, generally smaller projects. So we'd be glad to address any questions that you may have on those, but don't plan to go through a detailed review of those. And then Justin Harcum will be back at a future meeting, and if there are follow-up questions, be glad to have him address those, or Kevin's here as well, is familiar with that program.
Thanks,
and
Wayne.
if there are no questions there, I'll move to the high priority topics. And the first item on the agenda is the proposals for modifications to the regular commission agenda. And Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you if you'd like to summarize some of the ideas that have been proposed for the agenda.
Okay, I'll just briefly go back to the Rainwater Awards quarterly update and just encourage all the commission members to review that and keep that in your back pocket for when we hear from Justin again in the future, and invite any comment right now if anybody has any on that. Okay. With regard to the agenda for the commission meetings, one thing has kind of bothered me for a while, the fact that we have our public comment period slated for the very end of the meetings. You know, I work for government, and I kind of know how government meetings run, and you know, how to find agendas for public meetings, things like that. But most members of the public don't, and I think many times we may have the few people who do attend our meetings maybe waiting to hear something and have an opportunity to comment on something, and they don't hear it until and don't have that opportunity until the very end, and it turns out maybe they were in the wrong meeting the whole time. I think in order to invite participation from people who are very busy and may have to take work time off to attend meetings like this, I think it would be a good idea to move public comment forward on the agenda to allow people to come in, have a moment to give us their thoughts on issues before the commission, and then move along if there's if they don't have a need to stick around for the entire agenda. I think that would be consistent with other commission meetings, correct, Wayne? Other city
Yes.
commissions.
Yes, in general, it would be for the commissions that do have a public participation. It tends to be earlier in the agenda.
But I'd like to hear from other commission members your thoughts on moving that item forward on the agenda at future meetings. Today we have a published agenda, so we'd stick with it. But anyone for or against that, I'd be happy to hear from you now.
I'd like to support that. I think it's a good idea. I understand exactly what you said. Evan, I agree with you. It'd be good to get that out of the way up front so folks can go about their other activities they need to get done that day,
Okay.
This is David. I don't have any qualms with that idea. It sounds good to me.
Thank you. Reverend Taylor, I think you were speaking a moment ago.
Yeah, but wasn't unmuted. Yeah, I certainly support the idea, and it is consistent with other commissions such as planning and even the city council. So in favor of this.
And Mr. Stansel?
I'm in favor of it. I would like to note that given the short amount of time that I've been on the committee, I don't feel like I'm able to give an educated answer to the proposed change, but I would support it. Given what I've heard from the other members, I would gladly support it.
Okay. Well, I don't think we have to dwell on it too long. That sounds like pretty good support. I would recommend we keep it at the 10 minutes, and I think generally speaking, people have been allowed 2 or 3 minutes for comment, depending on how many people we have present who wish to speak, correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chair. Generally, we've gone with 3 minutes.
Okay. And obviously we can use some discretion there if we have fewer people or critical issues, things like that, in allotting time. So if that sounds like everybody's on board with that, I'd like to go ahead and make that happen beginning at our May meeting. Thanks. The other item on my mind, and would have been good maybe to introduce this idea a while back, but especially with us meeting online like this, we have not had much chance to get to know each other, especially the newer commission members haven't had much chance to get to know the older ones, and I mean, ones who've been around longer. And I feel like we do have people coming in and out of the commission every month. So I wondered if we might include a brief agenda item during the introductions. Well, we currently have an introduction marked at the beginning of the agenda where we introduce a commission member each month and give that person maybe 2 minutes to say something about themselves and why they serve on the commission. just so we all get a chance to know each other. And wondered what other commissioners would think of that idea.
Evan, I think that's a good idea. Since we are meeting virtually, the pre-meeting chatter or getting to know someone just really isn't possible. And this is a way, of course, to build community and rapport. So I think it's a good idea. And 2 minutes is, I think, more than enough time just to share something brief.
Okay.
Hey, I think that it's a good idea as long as we're not forced to speak for the 2 minutes if we, but I would support it.
Okay. And I guess we could put that in. I see that the current agenda actually has welcome, introductions, excused absences. I don't have a particular strong feeling, but that seems like a good heading to put it under.
I think so.
Okay. Well, and then the only other question is, what order do we go in? And we could put Katie up first because she's newest, but then she has to wait out almost an entire year to hear from everybody who we are. We could go alphabetically. I don't know if there's a strong feeling one way or the other.
How about oldest, who's been on the commission the longest? Time served. 'Cause I did give a brief intro last
Okay.
session.
Well, that sounds good to me. We'll start with those who've been serving the longest and work our way down, and then we can kind of once we've worked through everybody, we'll adapt and plug in new people as needed.
I'll make those changes to the agenda starting this month, Mr. Chair. And I'm sorry, just for clarification, one commissioner per meeting? Is that what you were suggesting?
That's what I had suggested.
Okay.
Just to avoid keeping going too long, although as Mr. Stansel said, we might have some pretty brief introductions. So
Be glad to do that. And we have the list of how long folks have been on the commission. So we'll go starting with the longest standing member first. I don't know who that is offhand, but we'll give you a heads up.
okay.
I have a feeling it might be me, but I'm not sure.
It may be. It may be.
Yeah, that's fine.
Very well. Okay, thanks everybody. I'll hand it back to you, Wayne.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item we have is an update on the flood-prone regulations text change process, and I'm going to turn it over, ask Ben Brown to give a brief update on that process.
Thank you, Wayne. Not too many changes to talk about, but is some exciting news. The Planning Commission recommended a public hearing for the text change, and that recommendation is going to the next council meeting, which is Tuesday, April 6th. At that meeting, council can either choose to schedule a public hearing or ask for more information. Staff is recommending that the public hearing take place May 4th at their evening session. And the only differences from the last time we spoke at the commission level was the Planning Commission moved the effective date back to next April 1st, so April 1st, 2022. So that's what the effective date is. They were hoping that would capture the newly updated FEMA maps in their effective date by that moving of that date to April 1st. Because I know when we last spoke at the March meeting, we were looking at a January 1st effective date. So if there's not any questions, that's all I have. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Brown? All right, thanks for that.
Okay, and the next item is an update on the budget work session presentation to City Council. So since our last commission meeting on March 15th, I presented to City Council on very similar to the presentation that I gave to the commission last meeting on our level of service alternatives and proposed budgets in program expansion areas that could be considered as a result of those level of service and rate increases. And the response from council was very good. In general, there seemed to be a lot of support for level of service 3, which, as you recall, corresponded to a proposed rate increase of $1.50 per month per single family equivalent unit, with one council member voting for level 2, or I guess there wasn't a vote. I shouldn't say that. It was expressing favorable interest in level 2, just because of potential impacts to some of the customers. And a couple didn't comment specifically, but based on that feedback that was given at that budget work session, the budget office has contacted us, and they are planning to propose the level of service $3.50 rate increase in the budget that they are preparing in more detail and will be taking to council as part of the formal budgeting process. So appreciate all of the input and feedback that the commission has given us in helping to prepare that. Be glad to answer any questions related to that.
Thanks, Wayne. That sounds like good news. I know there's a lot of projects out there, and shortening the time frame for that backlog is important.
Yes, and in response, I know there were some questions and concerns raised on impact to customers. One of the things that we've been talking about at the staff level, we'll bring back more information since it's been a little bit of time, but there is an update to the fee credit program that we are proposing as part of the design manual revisions. I know there's been a few commissioners that weren't here when we talked about that. So we'll bring back that information, that proposal, that I think will be something we'll want to educate our customers on, again, that those fee credit options are available to help mitigate some of the impacts of a fee increase. So we'll bring that information back to the commission as well, so that you're current and updated on that proposal as well. It is a program that's in place now, but we're proposing to modify the fee credits to expand the potential. The next item, as you recall at the last meeting, as part of the election of the officers for the commission, we also, you also appointed Commissioner Stansel as the liaison to the Planning Commission. And we do have our first liaison meeting scheduled for a week from today, April 8th, between Commissioner Stansel and the Planning Commission liaison is Commissioner Roberta Fox. So she will be the corresponding Planning Commission liaison that will be meeting with Mr. Stansel and I. And then Travis Crane, who is the staff liaison for the Planning Commission, will be in that meeting with us too. So we'll report back on some suggestions of what that liaison position, what those liaison positions really look like, and what type of a structure we'd recommend moving forward. And then the last item, we do not have any specific notices prior to construction to report this month. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. I'll just note for the record, I see Mr. Glenn Taylor has joined us. Yes, and okay.
Mr. Taylor did contact me. He was having some trouble getting into the meeting, was actually as an attendee. So I believe it looks like we were successful in promoting him. Sorry
Okay,
about
great.
the trouble, Commissioner Taylor.
Glad you could join us, Glenn. All right, any other commissioner comments on those items? If not, we'll move on a little ahead of schedule to an item that Mark Sr. has been working on. Unfortunately, is not able to join us on today, but he and David Markwood and Kevin Boyer have put a tremendous amount of effort into this plan for advancing green stormwater infrastructure. And I'm looking forward to hearing this update and hopefully discussion about the recommendations coming out of this group.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Kevin Boyer. Colin or Kelly, can you give me ability to share, please? While that's coming, just a little bit of background for those who are new. In 2019, City Council charged the Commission with returning with a plan for continuing to advance the use of green stormwater infrastructure, or GSI, in Raleigh. That was a modification from an earlier directive to come with a plan for making GSI mandatory in land development. The latest directive from the council came in August of 2019. Some progress was made through the end of 2019 and into 2020, and then COVID slowed us down quite a bit. We've made some considerable progress since then. We've been through some draft table format plans to submit to City Council based on comments we received at a GSI committee meeting well attended a few weeks ago. We've reformatted the table, made some additions and improvements to appearance, and emailed that to you a few days ago, and would like to run through that with you now. In addition to that table, we are working on an accompanying memo that we sort of will more or less track what's in the table, but not repeat it. The idea is for the memo to give context for what is in the table, but for the table to do the work and really be the plan. The memo, as it's shaking out, looks like it might be about a page of context and history, maybe 2 pages to tie into each of the 5 recommended city action items, and a page, equivalent of a page, probably dedicated to some photos and graphics. So we're trying to hold it to 4 pages. We'll see where it comes out, and perhaps work it down to 4. With that, I'll share the table that you, I believe, already have. And please tell me whether the table is on your screen.
Yes.
I see it there.
Okay, so I'll be moving around a little here, but I'll try to not to do it too abruptly. This is a update as of the 30th of March. And one of the recommendations that came from the GSI committee meeting was to reduce the number of columns. There was one column that didn't really do much work and maybe was even redundant with a heading. So we moved the description of each of the 5 city actions up to the top as a complete sort of action statement, and reformatted the 2 columns and put new headings on them. So I'll use this first one to describe what we've done here. I think in continuing to work with it, one thing we recognized maybe needed some help is, why are we doing this? What are we shooting for? What would success look like? And so we have added this heading of desired outcomes. And these are statements that that say, if all went well, what would we be doing out in the future that we're not doing now, or we would do better in the future than we do now, or more comprehensively. And then under that also under that why this is needed column is, what has been, not necessarily a drag on doing that, but what do we have to overcome? What do we face as our hurdles for doing that? What do we need to be thinking about? Then the other column is similar to what we had before. And those are literal actions that the city would take as recommended by the commission. And what we need to bring to the table to do that in terms of resources. And resources, you'll see the word budget quite a bit. And yes, it will cost money, but also just what in terms of management resources in addition to funding. One thing you don't see in this revised table is a heading of accomplishments. We decided that while that's important, we didn't want so much focus on looking back, especially way back in this table. And so we're striving to take those accomplishments and bring them into the memo for context. So there's emphasis more or less on the present and the future in this table. And so there are 5 of these city action headings. They really almost sole purpose of this agenda item today is to go through this, to let you know where we are on the memo, receive your comments, go to work on it, and send you a revision. And please feel free to send comments after today's meeting. Things occur to you later. Also in the meeting today, in addition to our own staff, Trevor Clements with Tetra Tech is joining us. Trevor and his firm have been helping us in our GSI work for quite a few years, and is an important contributor to this plan as well. So with that, if there aren't any comments or questions about the overall content and format, I'll move into the individual actions. Let's do it. I think one thing you'll see here, the first one is really the big one, and that is mostly about city GSI policy. That is, let's get organized, let's get systematic about how the city considers GSI on its own projects, and thereby lead by example. And that's why this first bullet, strives to make an affirmative statement in that regard. Also then goes down to these second and third bullets, which are paraphrasing from the policy, the draft policy, that says where no, to the extent that stormwater treatment is not required by current regulation. And by the way, that's partly by state law prohibiting that. The city will consider treating stormwater, even though we're not required to by our own ordinance. And that does not start out by saying must use GSI. It starts out by saying we'll consider treating stormwater, and then goes on to say we'll consider or we'll use GSI practices to the extent practical when that is done. And the third bullet is where stormwater treatment is required, we will evaluate the use of GSI in a systematic way. One thing you'll see up here under actions, I think it was David Markwood made the comment about the creation of the position of GSI advocate within the stormwater division is as relevant and important to city projects as it is to private sector projects. We had it only in action 2 before, so we've repeated it more or less, moved it up here to action and put it in context, and then cross-referenced it to action 2 as well. And otherwise, I think you'll see these are similar to what you saw before. And I'm certainly not going to try to read all of them or even give you time to read all of them here. And if you haven't had a chance to look at them already, please feel free to comment later. So that's the heaviest lift, I think, in these 5 actions, although they all have their own weight. And I'll, I'm happy to stop here and have some discussion about it, or if there are no comments, I can move on.
Does anybody have anything for Kevin? I'll just say that that I'll endorse that idea of leading by example and the idea of an advocate who can serve both private developers and the city's project managers. Someone to guide and show the way and help people adjust to a new way of thinking about water on a project would be really key to success.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think we made a significant improvement in both the readability and the impact of the table by adding this heading of desired outcomes.
Is the idea that the bullets on the left and right columns there's not necessarily a one-to-one correspondence there, right?
No intention of that at all. No.
Okay.
If you see an opportunity where that might make sense, glad to think about it. But, probably get a little tricky.
Right.
Happy to stay or move on. I'll go ahead and move on. And the second one now focuses on the private sector. And that's a little broader. It's provide information, support, recognition, and incentives to private developers and their designers for incorporating GSI. And the focus here, I think, will be a couple of things. One, again, is acknowledging and creation of the GSI advocate role. And a desired outcome there is that private designers will reach out and there'll be someone to receive them and designated to receive them and help them. But also to convene a stakeholder group that even, to help us tailor what we do to their needs rather than just what we think their needs and desires are. Now, it's not as if we haven't done this before. We did it quite a few years ago in stakeholder groups in the early going of our initiative, and it led to those initiatives led to revisions to the UDO that we intended to, and I think are more GSI friendly, removing barriers and making it more clear where GSI is appropriate to use. But we did find that for the most part, the private, at least the developer representatives who were invited and attended the first meeting and first of 5 or 6 and didn't follow it through. But many of their designers did. That is the private firm designers who understand and represent a number of developers did stick through the process, and we did get that input, but we did not get a whole lot of input directly from the development community. We'd like to see more of that in picking our stakeholder focus group and convene them, get together and listen. Hopefully listen and actively in a way that evokes the sorts of useful information we can then take into making the right kinds of changes that they'll recognize as useful and then make use of them. So the desired outcomes over here on the left is that they'll become familiar and comfortable, and their designers will reach out and we'll receive them, and the city staff will be available, and they'll explore opportunities, and even if they don't have to treat stormwater, maybe they'll do it voluntarily, and perhaps with the help of our Raleigh Rainwater Rewards program. And where that's most applicable here is where there are existing impervious surfaces where stormwater treatment is not required, or is required only to a limited extent. And the developer could choose to treat stormwater, and we could help them out. And that's frankly the reason that the downtown area is in the 90% category for Rainwater Rewards, because we want to encourage those downtown exempt areas, owners of those areas to treat stormwater, and we'll help them out to that extent. The challenges are as they were, but hopefully less than 7 or 8 years ago, in that many designers aren't familiar or are skeptical or think it always costs more. Well, we now have the cost tool available. We have a lot of resources available that we didn't have 7 or 8 years ago to bring to bear to help bring them into the fold if they're willing to listen and willing to work with us. Also wanted to call attention here for council, but for the commission as well. The fact that there is a North Carolina law that does what I've been speaking of, and that it exempts most existing impervious surfaces from stormwater treatment. And so there's only so much progress that regulation can make in improving stormwater runoff from already developed areas, in particular downtowns, because of the law. Again, budget, everything costs to run a program. And we also, though, importantly, will need to recruit those community representatives, development community, and their designers to come in and talk to us, spend some time with us, and talk about how we can make it better. So with that, I'll stop and gladly receive comments and discussion.
Does anybody have comments for Kevin?
I just have one comment regarding that second bullet under desired outcomes with private developers and designers reaching out to city staff. I guess I was wondering if it's possible for it to be the other way, with city staff reaching out to those private developers and designers? Or does that fall more under the first plan?
I think it really is under action 2 because the focus is on the private sector. And I'm glad you brought it up, because it's something that we can and should add. Just for some history and context, we have had a couple of sessions where we have presented to professional organizations and done a few lunch and learns at the offices of some of the larger design firms to talk about this, to talk about where we're going, how it works, what our vision is for what we call Green Raleigh Review, and private developer participation. It's always difficult to tell whether it makes a difference. You don't always know what works and what doesn't, because there's always a lag time and other sources of information out there and biases that are brought into play. But it only makes sense that would work. We've done a little of it, Katie, and it's a great idea to do more of it, to do more outreach kind of education in this case, as opposed to providing information for those to come and get or find. Let's go to them. So especially as we open up and can do literal lunch and learns in the future, and professional association luncheons and that kind of thing, but online until then. So yeah, that's a great probably action bullet, I think, more than an outcome bullet, but we'll get it in there. Thank you.
And I think, and maybe it needs a slight clarification, the outcome that you're alluding to there is the desire that those private developers and designers will know there's someone at the city they can go to who will provide assistance, right?
And they'll take advantage of it.
And take advantage of it.
Right.
Exactly. So hopefully that outreach to the development community yields that desired outcome.
So we got quite a stack of bullets there under actions, but there's always room for one more, and that's okay.
Other comments?
You see the language lead by example, just sprinkling that in wherever we can. So.
And Kevin, this is Trevor. You might take the bullet that already says continue to host workshops for developer and private designers about applications, and maybe change that to make it a little bit broader in terms of other outreach, including hosting workshops or something like that.
Oh, that's a good idea, rather than adding a bullet, just to expand on that. And the only difference is we go to them instead of they come to us. Thanks. That's good stuff.
Thank you, Kevin, for your presentation. I'm wondering if there was the possibility for inter-commission conversation. I know Mr. Stencil is the new liaison to Planning Commission. And I'm wondering, in that role, as projects go before the Planning Commission for rezoning, if this GSI recommendation, I don't know if it could be codified, or certainly cannot be mandated, but if both commissions could communicate, letting developers know not only is this available, but maybe that there's some pressure to use. And I know we can't do that by law, but really just thinking outside, how we can, thinking out loud, how can we communicate between commissions as a way of getting this great knowledge out there and perhaps embraced by developers.
I think it's a great comment, Jamon. In particular, farther down the list, there's the one about rezoning conditions, which is a lot of what the Planning Commission in particular does. I know you're not speaking only of the Planning Commission, but probably largely of the Planning Commission, and especially with Joe's new role, that's a great idea to, not only get in here, but as an item, as an action item, but to make sure that we do, and that even could include at some point a presentation to the Planning Commission or one of its committees about the city's initiative with GSI. I have made presentations to the Parks Board about that, but have not been, that I recall, invited, or anyone else invited, to the Planning Commission for that purpose. We could take some initiative in that regard and use Joe's new role to help that along, I think. And the Environmental Advisory Board. We've presented to the Environmental Advisory Board as well, but keep that on our list for some frequent liaison with them.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and we welcome the opportunity to pass any of this information on to the Planning Commission that we saw fit, and or any other boards or things that we could use to further the GSI.
That's great. And your counterpart with the Planning Commission, Roberta Fox, is very, very familiar with GSI, I guarantee you. It's in her experience, and her husband is one of the local experts in this subject as well, with the university, with NC State. Okay, thank you all.
Kevin, just one moment. I'm not adding another, suggesting another bullet point, but at the staff level, that liaison with planning, I wonder, is there an opportunity through something like pre-submittal reviews or pre-submittal meetings before a proposed rezoning application is put in for this GSI advocate to provide some information to people when they're at that stage in the process.
That's a good point, because I believe that by and large, the stormwater management division gets involved. I won't say only, but primarily when the stormwater components of the or ordinances of the UDO are in play. But there are many aspects of the UDO and the regulation of development that affect stormwater that aren't in the stormwater section. And we could do more to extend our reach and awareness of how decisions that others make actually affect stormwater. I don't know if any other staff care to comment on that. Those don't come to my inbox right now, but it's definitely something we can talk about.
Yeah, Kevin, this is Ben Brown. We're actually involved in the pre-application process with those rezonings, and we're having to cover that with existing staff now. So it's kind of spread. We're a little spread thin on that. So we're hoping with the advocate position, that'll help out, kind of make that a more consistent effort.
That's great. Yep.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Ben.
You might be able to expand that first bullet on the GSI advocate in terms of talking about providing that information, say, including it, pre-submittal meetings or things like that.
Oh, that's, sorry, I'm moving on to the next one, lost track of where I am. The first bullet up here where my cursor is now.
Yeah, so that you've already talking about the GSI advocate and you're talking about them to represent GSI. You might be able to insert a statement there, including at pre-submittal meetings or something like that to make the point that this is meant to be early in the process too, in this discussion, and might be a simple way to get that point across from what Evan was recommending.
That's good, but get it on the map so that it's there for later reference when the real action items come down for real action.
Yeah, I think you could maybe phrase it as identifying key decision points, something like that.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good stuff. Okay. Mr. Chair, okay to move on, you think?
Yes, please.
Action item. And this one is really more of the one that Reverend Taylor brought up. It's a little difficult to write about and talk about because it is really part of the political process rather than the administrative process where we live. And I guess one could say the commission straddles the two. We're providing some ideas here for the commission to take to council. And really what it's about is there are opportunities for the city to leverage developers to voluntarily take actions as a result of there being made zoning conditions. Staff needs to be very careful about crossing lines on that, about having expectations and certainly not requirements, and not getting overly involved in that process. But it is clearly a tool, a political tool available to municipalities. The city of Cary seems to be fairly active in this area. Our town of Cary, excuse me, and others are as well that I probably haven't heard about, but have heard from Cary. And we know of a case recently, the Downtown South project, where there were some zoning conditions made and related conditions that were approved by City Council, and will go into effect as a stage by stage as a large development is implemented. But So this is, basically just making stakeholders, developers, planning commission members, city council members aware that this is a way to get more GSI on development projects. And I'll stop with that and take comments and discussion.
My first thought is that this actually connects nicely to the conversation we just had about involving the GSI advocate in those early stage planning pre-submittal meetings and reviews.
Again, I don't disagree, Mr. Chair. I would remind again, I've said it a few times already, that staff needs to be, very, very careful about how involved staff gets in initiating conditions.
Absolutely. Anyone else have comments on this section?
Oh, something new, by the way, since this came to you before as a challenge, is I have had discussions with planning department staff on this. In the packaging of requests for rezoning, planning staff evaluates the request against certain items in the city's 2030 comprehensive plan, now called the plan update. And it's fairly unusual for any of those actions, policies and actions in the comprehensive plan under the heading of environmental protection or EP to be cited in those evaluations for rezoning. And the response I've gotten is, yes, good point. We need to take a harder look at that, but there's really nothing more systematic action to my knowledge been taken on that. And it could be because those actions and policies under EP are kind of general and difficult to evaluate on a site-specific basis. But I added this, we staff added this because we would like to see more consideration to that part of the comprehensive plan update given in rezoning cases. And cited a few examples here. And some of these, by the way, these EP 3.4, 3.8, 318, you've seen carried along just for the ride at the end of the draft city GSI policy, just as a reminder for the weight of city plans calling for this, for the city to do this sort of thing. So I'll go ahead and move on to the fourth one. This one is more of an in-house thing, I think, in-house for staff. And a lot of this is being done already, to be sure. Definitely some success stories. And that's for us to make sure that when we are doing area plans, corridor plans, neighborhood plans, that GSI is on the agenda from start to finish, and that the appropriate staff for giving that input and reviewing draft documents are on the teams and not just guests to the teams. Not exactly worded that way, but that's kind of been the practice in the past. If somebody thinks of asking stormwater to the meeting, we're there, but nothing has been very systematic. it's becoming a little more so, and this is calling for it to be so more systematic. That success story, I think, was called Midtown St. Albans up in the North Hills area, where we did work very closely with the planning team, and there were some great recommendations made in that plan that City Council endorsed and seemed enthusiastic about, called Green Streets. And we've actually since taken those project opportunities and budgeted for them in some out years in our CIP budget. So it gets it in the system early. The idea.
Kevin, is it obvious in this to other staff of the city that city parks would be included in that?
It wasn't on our minds when we drafted this, so I guess not. tell me what you're thinking.
I'm just thinking that every so often, a park gets refreshed and updated, and there's generally a park planning committee convened from members of the community around the park, as well as Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board members. And during that process of visioning and laying out plans to update the park, there might be opportunities to hear about incorporation of GSI. We had one here in my neighborhood, the Isabella Cannon Park. It's been 12 years ago now, where the consultant was astute enough to recognize some opportunities for things like grassed swales to be incorporated to improve drainage issues. But I think that was mostly a result of having a consultant who was reasonably well versed at the time in that kind of thing.
I think it's a great idea. Yeah, my first reaction was, well, won't we catch that under number 1 on city projects? But you're not. I think you're not speaking to a project now. You're speaking to a plan. Correct?
Right.
Yeah, and that's, yeah.
And there's these the park planning process will identify some things that are wish list items that there's not current funding for. But then at least there's a plan on the shelf that hopefully can be pulled down when money becomes available to do those things in the future. And I think if the residents of the community could hear about opportunities for GSI at the park during that planning process, that might help broaden the buy-in across the community.
Excellent. I think it fits very well here, and from an editorial standpoint, I think will be easy to incorporate.
It looks to me like it's kind of the same idea as roadway corridor plans and neighborhood plans. So hopefully it's not complicating things.
It's not a force fit at all. I think it'll slide right in. Thank you. It makes sense. Okay. I'll move on. And this one this overlaps, I'll say, with number 2, but none of them are absolutely discrete and clean in that way anyway. But this one is, we've as I spoke earlier, we've gave it our best shot at making revisions to the UDO that took effect in 2017. Maybe we hit the target, maybe we didn't. Maybe there's a better target. Let's take a look at this in-house with our own stakeholder groups and with private sector, private developer, designer, stakeholder input. Now, I did consider whether this should be merged into number 2, but our feeling is it's discrete and important enough that it should stand alone as its own action item. So there were 20 or so changes to the UDO made at that time. It took effect in 2017. Some of them were to make GSI allowable where it wasn't in the past. Some of them were simply to clarify that GSI is welcome and acceptable where it was not explicit. And to some interpreters of ordinances, if the ordinance is silent, it's allowable. To others, if it's not explicitly allowed, then it's not. So that it made that clarification. With that, I'll take some comments on on city action number 5, and then go to some general comments about the whole process.
Anyone have any further comments on the table?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and would like to call on other staff and our consultant Trevor Clements for additional comment. If you have any, Wade, Ben, anyone else? Wayne, excuse me.
Yeah, Kevin, I'd be glad to jump in here. There was one other item that may merit consideration for adding to this plan. It's something that we've been working on anyway, but I think it would be a good fit here. And that is a more defined program for O&M of GSI within the city. I think we all recognize that sustainable maintenance of GSI and really all stormwater control measures for that matter is important for their continued performance and for them to continue to achieve their desired benefits. And the city is already in the process of negotiating service level agreements between Stormwater, who has agreed long-term to take on this O&M responsibility for all city stormwater control measures, not just GSI, but certainly they would apply as well. And we've negotiated a service level agreement with Parks and Rec to do that, and that's been signed. And we're working on parallel service level agreements with other departments to help them maintain and take care of their stormwater control measures. But because there's been a couple of questions recently about maintenance and GSI, we think it may merit adding another action specifically related to the maintenance of GSI features and put together a list of recommendations and actions. And for example, those would be develop and sign service level agreements with other departments, dedicate funding and resources to ongoing inspection and maintenance of GSI features and devices within the city, and putting in a tracking program. Now for third-party GSI, those that are regulated or required either because of stormwater control regulations or, for example, as conditions for rezoning, those would already fall under a regulatory program, so would be inspected, and maintenance would be required, and annual inspection reporting and so forth required. So that program's already in place. But this would be in addition of a in-city GSI O&M program and service level agreements to make sure that is being done on an ongoing and sustainable basis. So with the commission's support, if everyone agrees with that, I propose we add one more similar table focused specifically on the O&M of GSI.
I'd support that, Wayne. We've talked several times about how important the operations and maintenance is So absolutely, I'd support.
I agree. I think that's important to consider.
That will be, we'll do that and work toward getting that to you shortly, hopefully next week, a revised table and work toward getting the draft memo to you as early as next week as well. But this would be city action number 6, then, having to do with SEM maintenance, but with emphasis on GSI in this case. And it would be in the same format of the 2 columns and 4 headings.
Regarding the memo, this is David or Kevin. This memo is coming from SMAC to City Council as a recommendation.
That's right. It is, and would be typically presented by a member of the commission, usually the chair. I think we touched on that a little bit last time, but also the typical format is for the commission member to open up and give context, and then hand off to the staff person to give the detailed presentation.
Okay.
It's a formal submission to recommendation to council by the commission.
I just wanted to ask him, and please forgive my lack of knowledge on the subject, but so like for the existing rainwater rewards program, are they all doing inspections now to, like, years down the road to look about, considering that the city had put money into it, I was just curious about that.
The way that works, and of course you are aware, they are owned and maintained by their owners for a certain amount of time. We don't inspect them except on an exception basis, but we do require and have a pretty good success rate of the owners submitting their annual reports on their upkeep of them. Now, of course, they aren't trained professionals, but for the most part, these aren't highly sophisticated or large-scale devices either. For us, a city investment over a certain amount, and I always have to remind myself whether it's $30,000 or another number, but it is in the policy. We have only 2 or 3 of these where the city has contributed that much. I think it's $100,000. We require an annual report from a licensed professional, an engineer or landscape architect. For the smaller scale ones, the rain gardens and the cisterns, it's a sort of a self-inspection by the owner, unless we feel a need to go out on our own for some reason.
I appreciate the education.
You're welcome.
Wayne or Kevin, the table contains a number of recommended actions that call for establishing a position, which therefore has a budget implication. Is that a part of the sort of vision in the level of service that has been presented to City Council so far, or is that a little farther down the road from the current level of service options that have been presented?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that position already exists. We have a vacancy in a senior plan review position in Ben Brown's plan review group, and we are proceeding with hiring that vacancy, and we are advertising it as such to be that GSI advocate position. So that's already in the works and already budgeted.
Okay, so there's no real budget implication at this time to these recommendations.
Not for that one. Now, for some of the others, there will be budget implications, but as you recall, the level of service 3 did include a proposed funding level of $750,000 for GSI that would be used on city projects where other stormwater controls are not already required. So that would be a very good start. And we would propose that would be a continue annually at approximately that level to fund the action number one, which is the lead by example action, which is going to be a big one.
And since there is that linkage and you've been asked to prepare budget recommendations, does that impact the timing of us completing this memo and getting this information to City Council?
No, I don't believe so. I think the timing would be good to proceed with taking this to City Council as soon as you're ready. The budget that they're voting on in June would start fiscal year 22, which starts July 1st. So I think timing wise, that would be right on track.
I'll mention that we are on a track. It's a tight track, but to bring to the commission in the May meeting the full plan to recommend to City Council. That does not mean that the commission would have to vote on it, agree on it then. But we believe we'll be prepared to do that. But that means in the meantime, over the next month, we passing documents back and forth. We can decide whether to have meaning probably staff and Mark Senior, in consultation with others, decide whether to have a GSI committee meeting or not, or whether it's more productive to simply pass comments back and forth. And it very well might be at this point of sort of refining the points of the documents rather than presentations and discussions. And so that we're shooting for, if the commission does vote to approve on May 6th, that we can have it queued up to go to City Council at the third meeting in May, which is the 18th. But there's no real pressure on the commission to take that vote in the May meeting.
Sounds like a good plan. Any other commission members want to provide any input, questions, etc. about the plan? Okay. Thank you, Kevin and Wayne, for all of that information and all the hard work of the GSI committee. David, thank you. And wish Mark were here so we could thank him too. I know there's a lot went into this, and look forward to seeing final outcome soon.
Thanks for the great input. Appreciate it.
Okay. Next up on our agenda, we have the finalists for the Capture It Stormwater Arts Contest. This is the only formal action item on our agenda today, and we'll be trying out a new way of voting where previously we went into closed session for this item to do the voting. We are instead going to be, I guess, trying out some new online voting methods, perhaps. I apologize, I've gotten away from the the script that Wayne prepared for me for introducing this item. But I think I've said enough, and maybe can hand off to Carmela Teichman for the formal introduction of our entries and contestants, and talk to us about our voting procedures this year. I think you're muted.
I hear now?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks everyone in the commission. Before we get started, I'd also like to thank all the panelists who have made it to the meeting today, all the finalists. Hopefully some of them are viewing today's meeting, and welcome to them. And I would like to thank them all for their hard work, as well as all the students who sent in entries this year. We had a total of 40 entries from a variety of schools throughout Raleigh. And that's a record number for this contest. So maybe COVID did have some great benefits after all. So I look forward to sharing their work with you today. As you mentioned, Mr. Chair, we're doing things a little differently this year, mostly online. And because of that, we'll be putting up the 9 entries that have made it to this finalist jury today. And we will review each one of them. And I'd like to read a little description of each one before you get to view them. And Kristen is helping out today and has very kindly put up the PowerPoint. You should have received a link in the chat box for scoring. And so I'm in the office today, so I apologize for having the mask on, and if I hope you can all hear me well enough. This form gives you the opportunity to score each one of the entries on a star basis. There are 5 stars. You can score 1 being the lowest score and 5 being the highest score. At the end of the scoring, you would hit the submit button. Kristen will receive all the scorecards, and the scoring will be done offline, and only Kristen will have access to those numbers to compile the results. And then the winners will be announced during a virtual announcement the week of Earth Week via Twitter. And so if you are interested in finding out who the winner is previously to that virtual announcement, just send Wayne a notice, and I'm sure he'll be glad to let you know which entry were the 2 winners. We have 2 different categories for this contest. One is an art category. It can be sculpture, drawing, painting, things of that nature. And the other are videos. And we'll be starting off with the art entries today. And so Kristen will bring up that first entry, and I'll give you just a little background on it.
Carmela,
First off,
pardon my interruption.
Mm-hmm.
Carmela, I'll pardon my interruption just a moment. I just wanted to note for everybody that we are reviewing the voluntary artwork submissions of 8th to 12th graders. And so just remind everybody I think we're accustomed to being pretty skeptical and critical of Rainwater Rewards applications and things like that. And this is not that situation. So we want to be encouraging and constructive. I don't think we'll have any issues with that, but thanks. Sorry.
No, that's all right. And thank you for bringing that up, because we have, this is from 8th to 12th graders. And so some of these students are able to then participate, if we're still unfortunate enough to have this program, for another 4 years if they're only in 8th grade. So we want them to come back and show us their work and their interest in saving and protecting our environment and our waterways. So before I move, yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Carmel. I just wanted to confirm that all the commissioners have been able to follow the link and get into the scoring card before we proceed. Have any commissioners?
I have not. I don't see where the scoring card is. I did review what was emailed to me, but I didn't recall seeing a scoring thing on that. Is it somewhere else?
It's in the chat.
Yes, it's in the chat. Correct.
In the lower right corner, if you click that chat button.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yep.
Also, we should mention that that scorecard has only been submitted to you commission members. So the public isn't scoring these, just you all are. And thank you for participating in this and your support of the program. One last thing, and I believe this is something that's a lesson learned from our internal jury, is you can't submit it if you haven't given an item a score. So you must give each entry a score of either 1 star, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Okay, just as a reminder. So any other questions? Is everybody understanding how we're going to move through this? I'm happy to answer any of those questions. And if not, we can go ahead. Okay, go ahead. Next slide, Kristen. This is our first art entry. It's actually a sculpture by Carly Norris called Purity is in the Hands of the Beholder. Carly is an 11th grader, and her description briefly is that the main premise behind the sculpture is that humans have the ability to maintain pure water and to stop polluting water, but we still do it. The cup of water in the hand represents water in its purest form. The hand itself represents mankind. It looks like a regular hand from far away, but up close, you can see that it's made of trash and plastic and is emerging from a puddle of oil. Trash and oil represent the pollutants that get introduced into water via the storm drains, being unclean, or people littering in or near water. And we'll give you a minute to mark your scorecard. Next slide, please, Kristen. Our second entry is from Cameron Middleton. He's also done this on his own. This is the individual entry. Cameron is a senior. His description is, I have created a sculpture of a freshwater fish made entirely out of recycled materials. I chose a fish to bring awareness to the ecosystems in which they inhabit and to encourage better stormwater management. If you'd like to mark your scorecard. Next slide, Kristen. Entry number 3 is from Mackenzie Book. This is a single entry. Why only rainwater goes down the storm drain. Mackenzie is an 8th grader at one of our local schools. Mackenzie's description, in my artwork, I depicted the key message of why only rainwater goes down the storm drain. I did this by showing a pond, an ecosystem where many storm drains enter, with ducks in it, whose habitat has been destroyed by pollution such as trash. That's your sheet. Next slide. This is our last art entry. It's from Rachel Setia, Life and Litter. She is an 8th grader, and this was done as an individual piece of artwork. Rachel describes her poster as having 3 major drawings: a dogwood flower to represent the flora, a red drum to represent the fauna, and a water droplet to represent the water in our ecosystem. The flowering dogwood is the state flower and the red drum is the state fish. And also shows that pollutants in the storm drain do not only affect the organisms living in lakes or rivers, it also affects animals at sea. Peace sign symbolizes that we should be at peace with nature and take care of it. Each letter of life and litter represents a type of category. L for cattail, I for daisy, F for branch, E for worm, L for straw, I for water bottle, T for cigarette butts. Apple core is E, aluminum cans R, and plastic bags. We'll move on to our next slide. This starts our video entries. This first one is by Autumn Teatree. Autumn did this on her own. She is also a 12th grader. It's a 1-minute video on healthy streams and a call to action.
Carmela, before you
Yes.
start the video,
Yes.
I just want to make sure everybody had a chance to submit their entries for the first 4. Is that how we should be doing this?
No, you'll submit the form all at the end, after
Okay.
all of them have been viewed.
Okay.
It should prompt you to go to a second page,
Okay.
but you won't formally submit it until the videos are done.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Kristen.
Okay, to start the video.
Thank you.
Doesn't it feel like the rain will never end? Beautiful ponds, like this one, are lovely to look at. They provide an important wildlife habitat and collect rainwater to allow it to be filtered before carrying on through the watershed. Unfortunately, the Raleigh area is seeing rapid land clearing and increased construction of housing and commercial areas. These factors are causing erosion and flooding. Fertile land and trees are eroding into creek beds every time it rains. Pollution and sedimentation are flowing downstream, and the degraded land is less able to hold and filter water, which leads to more flooding and worse pollution. We can all do something about it. Leaving buffer spaces like this one serves a dual purpose of not needing heavy chemicals like a lawn area does and water filtration. Use rain barrels to collect water and minimize runoff. Compost grass clippings and organic matter to increase soil fertility and production in order to minimize erosion. Pick up litter, especially near water sources. We can all create healthier streams and rivers if we each do our part to improve the situation.
Alrighty. Video number 6 is from Emma Babb. Emma is an 11th grader and did this piece on her own as an individual entry. She writes that stormwater runoff and pollution is getting worse because people do not know how to reduce it. Stormwater Secrets reveals where stormwater goes and how people can reduce pollution.
None of us ever really think about what happens when it rains. The water runs down the driveway and the road, but where does it go after that? The short answer is directly into our rivers and streams. This is a problem because all of the fertilizer, grass clippings, and other waste lying on the ground gets swept up with it and taken into rivers, polluting the water. If we don't stop this pattern, our streams may become irreparably polluted. But if everyone does their part, we can keep our streams clear for years to come. Clean up excess fertilizer and throw it away so it doesn't get in the rainwater. Same goes for grass clippings and pet waste. Get a rain barrel for your outside gutter so the water doesn't wash through the street and get dirty. Also, if you see trash when you're walking, pick it up and throw it away. If everyone does these simple things, many future generations will be able to enjoy clean rivers.
Okay, we're going to move on to the number 7 video. This is by Madison Helton, and Madison is a senior. And she writes, "It's our responsibility to protect our storm drains from litter, dangerous chemicals, and harmful bacteria and pathogens. In this video, I explain how the rainwater can pick up these harmful things before going down the storm drain and into our water system, like our creeks, rivers, and oceans."
It's been raining a lot here in Raleigh recently, but where does all the rain go? Well, when the rain hits the ground, it runs into the storm drains that collect the water and send it here to your local creek. These storm drains can often get clogged by litter and leaves, and the water can pick up chemicals that can contaminate our rivers and ocean. It's our responsibility to protect our storm drains. Dog waste contains bacteria and pathogens that we don't want in our water, so make sure to pick up after your furry friend.
It's my responsibility.
Don't dump your used motor oil on the ground or in the trash. Take it to your local automotive store to dispose of it properly and keep it out of our rivers.
It's my responsibility.
We all want to do our part to keep each other safe right now, but make sure your disposable mask makes it in the trash. It's my responsibility. Litter can clog up our storm drains and prevent water from reaching the river. Make sure your trash goes in the trash can and not on the ground.
It's my responsibility.
It's our responsibility to protect our rivers. Do your part and only let rain go down the storm drain. It's been raining a lot here.
Right, video number 8 is a group submittal. Price Ransom, Caleb Montnick, and Patrick Holman. They are juniors. Their description is, "Clean NC is an educational video that describes how polluted stormwater affects our environment and ourselves. We did this by filming shots of the beautiful water and scenery at Falls Lake while cleaning up the garbage that we find and explaining what you can do to help and how it adds up to the plentiful benefits of Falls Lake."
Earth is so unique because of its abundance of life and water. The Earth is 70% water, but only about 2.5% of that is fresh water. We are standing here in Falls Lake. Over 4 million North Carolinians receive their water from the Neuse River, which feeds directly into the water we stand next to. Stormwater makes its way in the streams, rivers, and oceans, so its pollution pollutes the rivers that supply water to the public. The pollution can clog pipes and waterways, harm and even kill fish in aquatic environments, and threaten public health and safety. Also, it's very gross to look at.
Come on, man.
The pollution can kill our local environments and seriously sicken our population. However, you can help protect our water. Ways to diminish the stormwater pollution is to clean up the litter we see around us, clean up after our pets when they go, plant flower pots underneath the gutter so the water is naturally filtered, and when you go to wash your car, wash it in the grass instead of your driveway. Only you can save the world from pollution. Earth is so unique because of
And our last entry, number 9, is a group submittal. Allie Arnold and Reagan Watkins, Reclaim Runoff. Reclaim Runoff discusses what stormwater runoff is, how it can become polluted, and the negative impacts polluted runoff can have on our environment. It also suggests small changes that can be implemented to reduce stormwater pollution.
Water. We use it every day for drinking, bathing, cooking, and ultimately for living. Water is recycled through the hydrologic cycle. Water evaporates from Earth's surface and eventually returns back to land in the form of precipitation. Precipitation flows over driveways, lawns, and streets. Some of this water soaks into the land. The rest flows into sewer grates and storm drains and is known as stormwater runoff. From the storm drains, runoff water flows into local waterways. Here's the problem. Stormwater runoff can easily become contaminated with pollutants. As it passes over lawns, chemical contaminants and fertilizers pollute the runoff. Passing over streets causes the water to become polluted with litter and trash. Flowing over driveways can cause runoff water to become contaminated with chemicals. All of these pollutants can have negative effects on our waterways. So what can we do? Pick up your trash and dispose of it properly. Reduce use of fertilizers for gardening. Wash cars on grass or go through an automatic car wash. These small changes in your daily routine can help preserve our waterways and ensure we have clean water for the coming generations.
That's all of them. Unless you have any questions, you're able to submit your form, and Kristen will take care of tabulating those entries.
Thank you, Carmela. Any commission members have any questions, problems?
Thank you all very much for participating and supporting this program. It is a great fun to do, and the students are just wonderful. Thanks so much.
And thanks to all the students who've submitted, and if any of them have come to the meeting today, thank you for taking the time to come and join us. I look forward to seeing you again in the future. Okay, with that, the only item left on our agenda is public comment. Wayne, do we have anyone signed up?
No, not aware of anyone that signed up, and looking at chat, nothing specifically that needs to be brought to the commission. There were a couple comments from one participant, some questions related to the GSI advocate position and how that would interact related to design or early design discussions, but that's something that that we can talk about and address in the plan, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Any other commission members have any items they'd like to bring to our attention today? All right. Well, looks like we have covered everything. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting? I have Ken Carper making a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Looks like a three-way tie there. We'll give it to Mr. Moore. And all in favor? Any opposed? Okay. All right, the meeting of the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission is adjourned. See everybody again in May.